And their distress is a projection of the distress that our narrator is also experiencing. And this, and I love when Duffy does these metaphors like this, it's then captured beautifully in this ingenious metaphor as the miles rush back to the city, the street, the house, the vacant rooms where we didn't live anymore. Now, Duffy does this in a number of her poems. She does it in Last Post as well, where what she does is she takes you on a journey, a physical journey, in rewind. So whenever I read the line, I almost envisage, it's like a film, and you watch the car travelling from where they are just now, from the city to the street, to the house, to the vacant rooms, and it's going backwards, it's in reverse, and they're actually going home. And that's what that image does, is it creates the journey of going home in rewind. So it's quite a, surprise, surprise, it's quite a complicated image to try and unpick. Combining your analysis with features of structure can actually be helpful in doing that, because what we've actually got, in essence, is a list. So if you start with the list, I think that helps you. It's a list, and suppose you could say the significant moments or significant places, or another way to describe it, within a journey. And that journey is being used as a metaphor to express her desire. That's what she wishes. She wishes that they were going back from the city to the street, to the house, to the vacant rooms. But unfortunately, that's the place where they don't live anymore. And clearly the tone that we've got here is sad, sorrowful, perhaps with an element of nostalgia attached. Sorrow and loss are probably the two tones that I would pick up on there. So we have this sense of sorrow and this sense of loss. And then the next piece of enjambment, again, does a number of things. I stared at the eyes of a blind toy holding its paw. So what that actually does is it helps to identify our narrator. So at this particular point in the poem, what we have is a young Duffy. Okay? We assume that because it's quite unusual for an adult to carry around a teddy and hold its paw for comfort and reassurance. It's not unheard of, but it is unusual. Okay, so we can assume at this point that we have a young narrative voice, and that's what we hear. And that's marked by the fact that she's carrying this teddy around. But the teddy also functions as a piece of symbolism, a metaphor, and it's this metaphor on blind. The teddy is described as being blind. Now, a teddy cannot literally be blind because teddies can't see. And I think the reason why this particular feature is afforded to the teddy is, again, it's about this sense of confusion and this sense of being lost and not knowing where you are, and the teddy is mirroring that. But also within that, you can make reference to the fact that she is holding its paw. And the holding of the paw is about seeking comfort and seeking reassurance. And if someone is seeking comfort and reassurance, we can assume that's because their emotional state is such that that's what they actually need. So again, this is all about suggesting distress. So we have some children, more than one boy, and our narrator in the back of this car, and they are clearly upset. And that's what we can establish from the opening stanza. We then have a brilliant metaphor where Duffy actually makes the poem universal. And the process of growing up is being compared to an emigration. And what makes this universal is the fact that what's being emphasised is the fact that it involves significant change. And when we talk about something being universal, that means the idea that it can be applied to most people. So what you have in this poem is it works on two levels. This is Duffy exploring when she moved from Glasgow down south. Okay, so that's this. So that's an experience that she has had that some people reading this poem will also share, but not everybody. But the experience that everybody does share is change, and significant change. And she's saying that the process of growing up involves significant change, and that's the universal aspect of it. I think it's also interesting, the word choice of emigration, and you can certainly comment on that. Anybody want to hazard a guess why I think that that's in some ways significant and worth comment? Is there another word that she could have used?
Immigration.
And what is the difference?
Immigrating is when you're coming out. Immigrating is when you're coming in.
Yep. So immigration is this idea of moving away from rather than moving towards. Okay? So again, it's about a sense of loss, a sense of leaving something behind, as against a sense of gaining, moving towards something. It's also significant because immigration is the process of moving, and that is in essence what the poem is literally about. Okay? Okay, so then what she does is she starts to talk about these emigrations, and this is where you need to start to understand it from the more kind of universal perspective. So she describes the way that change can happen. So sometimes change is slow, leaving you standing resigned up an avenue where no one you know stays. So again, what we've got here is a metaphor. In this particular case, is that the change that they're talking about is a progressive change, it's a slow change. And what's actually important about this image is the impact of it. And it's only when we then look to the remainder of the metaphor that we can actually start to understand that. So what is the impact? Well, you're left standing, resigned, up an avenue where no one you know stays. So you could then look at the individual elements standing from a word choice perspective in this particular context, standing connotations of being lost and unable to act. Resigned has connotations of acceptance of something that you do not want. If you're resigned to something, there is a suggestion that this thing is something you didn't necessarily want. Okay? So connotations of acceptance. So if we undergo a slow change, sometimes it can make us feel a wee bit lost and we're not really sure what to do. A slow change can also make you feel, well, it can help to accept it, accepting something that you perhaps didn't want. And then we've got no one, we'll go with that one, which is also suggesting it's quite isolating and quite lonely. So she's saying that slow changes sometimes can make you feel a bit lost. They enable you to accept them, but they can also leave you feeling isolated and lonely. And that's the impact of a slow change. Then we have the introduction of the antithetical metaphor, where others are sudden. And this is still a metaphor, and it's done in a short sentence. So we have a short sentence where we're looking at sudden change. And this metaphor is just simply the opposite in some ways to the previous one. Okay, but this time the change is unexpected and it's quick. Sudden would suggest unexpected, sudden would also suggest quick. And it explores the impact of a sudden and quick change. So let's have a look at what happens if you have a sudden and quick change. So your accent is wrong. We've got a short sentence which emphasises the sense of difference, being different, and with that some kind of form of isolation because of that difference. Corners which seem familiar, leading to unimagined pebble-dashed estates, big boys eating worms and shouting words you don't understand. I think it's also worth commenting on this idea of familiar in terms of word choice. The 3 comments below explain the impact. So let's just list them so we've got them collectively at the top there.